They say siblings share everything: blood, memories, even fears. But sometimes they share something darker, something that lives in the silence between them. This is the story of Ethan and his younger sister, Mia. Two siblings who spent the worst summer of their lives alone in their family's old house on Ashridge Lane. Their parents had left for a short work trip, for nights, maybe 5, leaving the two of them to hold down the fort. It was an old 2-story home surrounded by thick woods and the quiet hum of crickets. They'd grown up there, but after that week, they never went back. The first night was peaceful. Ethan, 16, stayed up late playing games in the living room. Mia, 12, was in her room upstairs watching old cartoons. It was around midnight when Ethan heard it, a soft, tapping sound on the back window. 3 slow knocks. He paused his game and looked toward the kitchen. Nothing. The porch light was off, the window pitch black. He figured it was a branch brushing against the glass, but when he went closer, he froze. There were no trees behind that part of the house, only open grass and the edge of the woods, 30 feet away. He stood still, listening. Then came another knock, closer this time. Tap, tap, tap. He grabbed a flashlight, pointed it toward the window, and saw a pale reflection staring back. It wasn't his. 2 hands were pressed against the glass from outside, small hands, child-sized. Then the hands dropped out of sight. Ethan ran to the door, flung it open, and shined the light into the yard. Nothing, just the wind, the field, and the empty darkness. He told himself it was just his imagination. But upstairs, Mia called down, her voice shaky. "Ethan, someone just knocked on my window." Her room was on the 2nd floor. They barely slept that night. Every few hours, they heard faint footsteps somewhere in the house. Not heavy steps, light ones, like a child's. By morning, Ethan checked every door and window. Locked, secure. He even walked around the house outside, but there were no footprints, not even in the soft dirt below Mia's window. The second night, it happened again. The same tapping, same time, around midnight. But this time it moved, first on the kitchen glass, then the living room, then the walls, like someone was dragging their hand slowly along the outside of the house, circling it. They turned off all the lights and crouched by the stairs, listening. The sound circled the house once, twice, and then it stopped. The silence was worse than the noise, until something whispered from the dark. A faint voice that sounded like a child laughing. On the 3rd day, Mia refused to sleep in her room. Ethan let her take the couch downstairs. That night, the air felt different, colder, heavier. They tried to stay awake watching TV, but sometime after 1 a.m., Mia dozed off. Ethan muted the TV and listened. Silence. Then scratch. A soft scraping from inside the walls. Slow, deliberate. It moved upward behind the wallpaper toward the ceiling. He followed the sound to the hallway. The scratching stopped right above Mia's old bedroom. He opened her door slowly, shining his flashlight. Everything looked normal, but then he noticed something strange. The closet door was open, just a crack, and from inside it, a small, pale hand pressed out against the slats. Ethan dropped the flashlight. When he picked it up again, the closet was empty, but on the inside of the door, scratched into the wood, were words. They read, "She's not alone." The next morning, they packed their bags. But when Ethan tried to start the car, it wouldn't turn over. Battery completely dead. They called their parents. No answer. No service. The house was too far from town for a signal. So they decided to wait until morning and walk to the gas station a few miles down the road. That night, the knocking came again, louder, more urgent. But this time, it wasn't on the windows. It was coming from inside the walls. Tap, 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 then a whisper. A child's voice, soft, echoing. It said, "Why did you lock me out?" Ethan froze. Mia clutched his arm, whispering his name, but before he could answer, Every light in the house flickered. The power went out. In the dark, they heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Slow, dragging steps. They weren't heavy like an adult's. They were small, uneven. Ethan aimed his flashlight toward the stairs. And there she was, a little girl, no older than 6, dressed in a faded nightgown, hair matted, skin pale gray like she'd been underwater. Her eyes were wrong, too dark, too empty. She stared at them and whispered, "You took my room." The flashlight flickered, and she was gone. They didn't sleep that night, just waited for daylight. When morning came, Ethan went outside to find help, but the world outside felt off. The air was still, soundless. Even the birds were quiet. He went to the back of the house, where the first knocks had come from, and there, in the dirt, were small footprints, barefoot, leading to the basement door. A door they never used. It was padlocked shut, or at least it had been. Now, the lock was broken. Ethan hesitated, then opened it. The air that came out was cold, the kind that felt ancient. He stepped down the creaking wooden stairs, flashlight shaking. In the corner of the basement, something moved. He aimed the light and saw a small wooden chair facing the wall. On it sat a music box, slowly turning on its own. The tune was soft and slow, like a lullaby. Next to it lay a tiny stuffed rabbit, rotten, torn. On the wall above the chair were faint words, written in a child's handwriting. It said, "Don't let her leave." Behind him, Mia screamed. He ran upstairs. The front door was open. The house was freezing. Mia was standing in the doorway, pale and shaking, staring out into the yard. In the middle of the grass stood the same little girl, holding Mia's hand from 30 feet away. Ethan ran to her, but as he did, the figure disappeared, just vanished into the air. Mia collapsed unconscious. When she woke up hours later, she didn't remember what happened, but she said something strange. She said the girl told her she lived here first. That the walls remember. Their parents came home the next day. They found the house cold. Every clock stopped at 3 a.m. They moved out that same week. Years later, Ethan looked up the property's history. Back in 1989, a little girl named Charlotte Granger went missing from that same house. Her parents told police she disappeared one night after knocking on her brother's window to tell him she couldn't sleep. The case was never solved. Ethan never saw the girl again. But every now and then, Mia wakes up around midnight, and she swears she can still hear the tapping. Always 3 knocks. Always from the side of the house, where there's no window. Some houses remember the people who lived in them. Others never let them leave. Some houses don't welcome guests. They invite them. This is the story of the Lanes, a quiet family of 4 who accepted a weekend invitation to stay at a countryside mansion belonging to old family friends. It was supposed to be a getaway, a reunion, but what they found waiting inside that house wasn't friendship. It was something else. It was a long drive, miles of forest roads, no signs, no neighbors. The air grew colder the farther they went. Even the GPS started to glitch, the signal fading in and out until finally, a large iron gate appeared to the fog. Blackwood Manor. The father, David, stopped the car in front of it. Rust covered the gate, the name barely legible. He pressed the old intercom button. It crackled to life with static. Then a faint voice answered, "Welcome. The gate is open." The gate creaked and swung inward on its own. Inside, the driveway was long, lined with dying trees and stone statues worn smooth by time. At the end stood the mansion, tall, Victorian, and silent. Its windows looked like eyes. When they stepped out, the air was unnaturally still. No birds, no wind, only the faint hum of something unseen. The front door opened before they knocked. A woman stood there, smiling politely. She introduced herself as Mrs. Alden. "You must be the Lanes," she said. "We've been expecting you." Her voice was calm, but her eyes didn't seem to blink long enough. Behind her stood a man, tall, pale, wearing an old-fashioned suit. He simply nodded. They didn't look like anyone David remembered, but he didn't say anything. That evening, dinner was served in the grand dining room, a long table with old silverware and flickering candles. Everything about the house felt wrong. The furniture was covered in dust, but the table was perfectly set. The walls had portraits of people, each with their eyes scratched out. As they ate, the mother, Claire, noticed something strange. The couple, the Aldens, didn't touch their food. They just watched, smiling. When Claire asked how long they'd lived there, Mrs. Alden paused, then said softly, "Oh, a very long time. We never left." David laughed nervously, thinking she meant she'd lived there her whole life. But then the candles flickered, and for a split second, he saw something wrong with her face. Her skin almost transparent, and her reflection in the silverware wasn't there. Their daughter, Lucy, whispered, "Mom, there's someone behind them." When Claire looked again, there was no one, only the cold air and a faint shadow moving across the ceiling. That night, they were given separate rooms. David and Claire in the master bedroom. The kids, Lucy and her older brother, Ben, down the hall. As the night deepened, the house began to change. The air grew heavier. The lights flickered without reason, and faint voices began to whisper through the vents, as if the walls themselves were speaking. Lucy woke around 2 a.m. Someone was humming outside her door, a soft, childlike voice, singing a lullaby she didn't recognize. She sat up, listening. The door slowly creaked open. A figure stood in the hallway, small, pale, wearing a nightgown, head tilted. "Are you lost?" the little girl whispered. Lucy couldn't answer. She froze. Then, the girl smiled too wide and vanished like smoke. The hallway went black. Lucy screamed. By the time her parents rushed to her room, the door slammed shut on its own. David tried forcing it open. It wouldn't budge. When he finally broke it down, Lucy was trembling on the floor. The window was open, curtains blowing, though they were on the third floor. The next morning, Claire noticed something horrifying. In one of the dusty portraits in the hallway, a new set of faces had appeared, faint but recognizable. Their own, her, David, Ben, and Lucy, painted into the background, expressionless. When she told David, he didn't believe her until he looked himself. He touched the canvas. The paint was still wet. They tried to leave that morning, but the main doors wouldn't open. No matter how hard they pulled, it was like the hinges had fused. The windows wouldn't break. The phones had no signal. Then Ben called out from the stairs, "Dad, someone's outside." Through the cracked glass of the front door, they saw silhouettes moving along the fog-covered driveway. People, dressed in old clothes, gray, faded, wrong. And every one of them was facing the house, still watching. As night fell again, the house grew colder, unnaturally cold. Every candle they lit went out on its own. Footsteps echoed upstairs, though no one was there. Then came a knock on the wall. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. It came from behind the fireplace. David moved it aside and found a narrow door hidden behind the stone. It led to the basement. The air down there was heavy, metallic, like old blood, and in the center of the room stood a long dining table, identical to the one upstairs. But this one was covered in dust and skeletons still seated around it. Old clothes, rings, watches, all belonging to people who had visited. And at the head of the table, 2 figures sat hand in hand. The Aldens, dry, decayed, and long dead. They ran up the stairs, down the hall, toward any door that might lead out. But the house shifted. Corridors stretched, doors vanished, rooms twisted like a maze. Lucy screamed as she saw the portraits changing. their painted eyes now following her, the smiles widening. The voices returned, whispering from the walls. "Stay for dinner. You're a part of us now." The last thing Claire remembered was grabbing her children and running for the front door. It finally opened, but when they stepped outside, the fog was so thick it felt alive. And when she looked back, the mansion was gone. Only an empty field remained. Police later found their car abandoned near Blackwood Hill Road. No house, no ruins, just tire marks leading to an open clearing and stopping abruptly. The lanes were never found. But hikers who pass through the area say that sometimes, on foggy nights, you can still see lights flickering through the trees and hear faint music playing like dinner being served. Be careful where you visit. Some homes don't want guests. They want replacements.